Welcome to Speed Talk Live, which isn't really live, but a poorly produced podcast where we talk about NASCAR and all things racing. And occasionally we have a special guest or two, when we can get them to show up. Sit down, strap in, pull those belts tight. Speed Talk Live is on the air.
Pace car is in. Green flag, green flag, green flag.
Welcome everybody to another edition of Speed Talk Live. I'm Greg Engel. Glad you could make it with us today. Coming out of Indy, we're going to talk about Indy. We're also going to talk about things that don't have anything to do with NASCAR, but that's the next 2 weeks. So we'll talk about that. Like I said, I'm Greg Engel talking to you from my home base here in Orlando, Florida, where it's like 150 degrees outside, but we don't move here for the balmy summer weather, so that's okay. I've also got with me, as always, the associate editor, cupscene.com, Owen Johnson. What's up, pal?
Hey, Greg, it's great to join you again, coming to you from Virginia Beach, where it's a little bit cooler, but it's been raining for the past week, so not sure it's the better end of the deal.
Yeah, I used to I had an aunt that lived in Virginia Beach, and when I was a kid, we would go there for the summer. So a lot of memories in Virginia Beach. But we wax poetically. Let's wax poetically about the Brickyard. The first time we returned to the big oval, Kyle Larson wins it in a double overtime finish. That was a little bit controversial, coming to the end of the race. But during the race, there was also another bit of controversy when Chase Elliott was penalized for coming up out of the blend line out of the pits. Brad Keselowski was penalized for the same thing, coming out of the pits, coming out of the blend line too soon onto the track. NASCAR said that they had told him that. If you look at the pre-race briefing video, which is on our YouTube channel, they did allude to that. So that wasn't as big a controversy as the end of the race. Brad Keselowski, again, overcoming that penalty. He was, I don't know where he was having the fuel from, but he was like 20 laps over what the fuel mileage was supposed to be. He was leading. They came to an overtime finish, the first of one. Coming to that, he pulled off from the lead right as they were coming to get the green flag. Kyle Larson moved up to the inside right after Brad pulled into the pits and surrendered to that. Kyle Larson then led at the red flag that they had because they had an accident behind them. Really bad accident. It took out Denny Hamlin. I know Denny wanted to win. Took him out. Then they had a red flag for 17 minutes. Then the second overtime. Here's where the controversy came in, and it's still being talked about, but we're going to go to that in just a minute. We wanted to know, we're coming to the start of that first overtime, when he saw Keselowski leave, what was going through Kyle Larson's mind?
Well, leading into it, we had a lot of communication on our radio about, Brad was going to be really close on fuel, and he may run out of fuel under these cautions, and so I was going to choose behind him no matter what lane he took, in hopes that he would run out before we got to the restart zone. And I was trying to pay attention to him, and he was cycling his engine and trying to clean and warm his tires up just to see if there was any bit of stumble, and then he just ducked off on a pit road. And I was like, wow, I can't believe this is going exactly how we had kind of hoped and had thought about. So then I came to the restart zone, and I'm sure Ryan and I were both probably confused on who is now the control car. I didn't know. I could tell maybe he didn't know. So we kind of both, I felt like, took off at the same time. The pace was up a little bit faster. So it was just a bit confusing, but I was able to get the position into one, and then saw a big crash in my mirror and was a little bit bummed because I knew it'd be really hard to pass me after clearing to the lead. But I had to sit through a lengthy red flag and kind of replay some things in my mind about how this next restart might work out, and thankfully it just worked out where I could get barely clear. He did a better job the second time to hang with me. I thought he might almost have leverage enough to stay side by side exit of one, because if he would have stayed with me exit of one, who knows how the who knows who wins? We're probably 3 wide down the backstretch with the 45 coming. So, yeah, distinctly I was able to edge out through 1.
Of course, Kyle Larson went on to win. I think he would have won anyway. I think he was in control of the race at that point. And of course, Blaney fans were outraged. And because Ryan Preece crashed out at that first overtime, and NASCAR seemingly waited like 8 seconds before they threw the caution, which just so happens that the field had crossed the start-finish line. I got my own take on that. We heard from Elton Sawyer. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but I want to hear your take on this, Owen, about this somewhat controversial second overtime finish.
Well, just to go with the second overtime start, to talk about the number 6 itself with Brad Keselowski coming into the pits. He came in right as the restart was about to begin, which enabled Larson to move up and take the position on the front row of the restart, giving him the preferred lane, the inside, which is such an advantage at Indy. And so I know there's going to be a lot of frustration, an element of frustration for Blaney fans at the 6. But Keselowski explained on Twitter this week that he was just going for the win himself. He said, if you look at the Nashville race, this strategy won when the yellow came out on the last lap. So definitely worth the risk, referring to Joey Logano's win earlier this season. We know how good the fuel mileage the Fords get from that now. It was well over the predicted fuel mileage at Nashville too. And so clearly that's what Keselowski was going for. And after the race, the team found that he had enough fuel for at least a lap, he explained, but for some reason the car didn't fire on the restart, which is why he had to pull in. More work to do to understand why it didn't pick up. Can understand the 12 team's frustration, he admitted.
So there you go. He had enough fuel in the tank for an extra lap, but could he have made it? He said the car wasn't firing off. That would have been a mess had he tried to stay out and the car wouldn't fire up. There he was in the lead. But Elton Sawyer, as he's apt to do, who's NASCAR's director of competition, vice president of competition, he's an executive, said on Sirius XM this week, this was a bang call. Obviously, we're coming to the green. We've already gone through the choose process, thinking everything's fine. We've started to kind of focus on the restart zone there, making sure everybody's in line when they need to be, and then Keselowski pulls off. Larson starts to roll up to the front row like he should to get side by side with Blaney. All of this is happening extremely fast as Blaney becomes the control car, doesn't get lane choice. So the way it's unfolded is the way it did, and naturally it looked fine. We'll go back and just see if there's anything we would have done different. Even if we hypothetically would have thrown a caution, we still wouldn't have went back through the choose process. We'd already done that. So they'd already done the choose process. So they wouldn't have done the choose process again. So Larson still would have lined up in the place he had. And I think the outcome would have been the same. But on that second overtime, Ryan Preece ran out of fuel in the final overtime restart coming out of turn 2. He was hit from behind, spun into turn 2, into the wall, but it wasn't hard. He came out, he was on the apron, and he was attempting to turn around, to come back, to continue, but stopped on the track. NASCAR didn't throw the caution immediately until the leaders were in turn 1 on the final lap. Having taken the white flag, the caution flag ended the race. Now, Sawyer explained NASCAR's decision not to immediately throw a caution for the Preece incident, which could have come before the white flag was displayed and set up another overtime restart. Sawyer said, for the fans, our goal at every event is to finish under green. This is what our goal is going into the weekend. But there's circumstances that happened on the last lap at Indy, and I'll go back to the last year at Pocono, very similar situation with the same car, I might add, the 41. Both, we were trying to give that car every opportunity to get started, get rolling, and let the race in naturally. As we came off turn 4, coming to the start-finish line for the white flag at Indy, it's a 2.5-mile racetrack, so you still have got a lot of racing that can happen. As the cars start to get off into turn 1, where you're starting to get closer to having to make a decision, that's our process. That's our mindset, the same as last year at Pocono. I believe the 41 spun there in the tunnel turn. Again, you give the drivers every opportunity to get going, but also the guys that are leading as they're racing. You can't let them race through a situation where you've got a car stopped on the racetrack. So that was our decision process and how we kind of digest that very quickly. Now, my take on this was NASCAR made the right call. Of course, the conspiracy theorists were out there saying they didn't want, because of we had breaking news on Sunday with the presidential election, and the networks were going back and forth, and they didn't want to see it go any longer. They were worried about the daylight. They were worried about more people running out of fuel. So they made the decision to end this race under caution because their golden boy was leading. I don't believe any of that crap. I believe NASCAR genuinely was just like Elton said. They were seeing the cars, big track. They had enough time to make the decision to see if Priest would start rolling. When it was obvious he wasn't, and here was the field coming by racing, you could have had something else happen, and there was Priest sitting in the, on the side of the track. Something could have happened. They could have crashed, and it could have been a far worse situation. So I think NASCAR made the right call. But in 8 seconds they didn't have time to discuss, well, what about the networks, and what about we want Kyle Larson to win? No, I don't think any of that's true. I really believe that that's what happened. So, and as you point out, Owen, there was another factor that probably factored into Priest not being able to move.
Right. And it's just what we've seen multiple times. Joey Logano's talked about it when it affected him, but it's the product of flat tires in this car. When this car gets these flat tires, it gets stranded on the track. It can't really move based on the new height of the car, the new height of the tires. There's no real solution. NASCAR hasn't really found one yet. They kind of end up having to tow the cars back every time. Can't get them restarted on track. But that's something to take in mind that I didn't think Sawyer addressed was, yes, I'd like to see cars moving, but it's just so unlikely nowadays if the tires go down. Maybe I'd like to see them change some approach to their officiating with that in mind. But other than that, I completely agree with you. I think it was the right call in the situation. Just maybe a product of the new car that we might need to change our approach.
There was some other criticism from people about single file racing and not a lot of passing. I thought it was a good race. And if you look at the Indy 500, it was kind of the same way. There wasn't a lot of passing. It was a lot of single file racing. And that, to me, is the essence of what the big track's like. You're going to have that single file, single pack racing. But wait a minute. The Xfinity series said, hold my beer, because the finish on Saturday was nothing short of electric. Riley Herbst was 3 wide with first Cole Custer. Then they took the white flag, and then he was 3 wide. Then he was fighting with Eric Almirola as they were 3 wide coming to the white flag. Herbst powers by Almirola on the final lap. What a heck of a race that was! And I know you wrote about it, so you were watching, and what you think?
Yeah, absolutely. An incredible finish. Herbst goes around his teammate Cole Custer, going for his second win, which he ultimately did get. Congratulations to him. Goes around his teammate Custer, but by slowing them down with the side draft, Eric Almirola is able to get a run in the 20 car, making a part-time start for Gibbs this year in the Xfinity Series. And Herbst has to go put a perfect lap together to chase him down and get him in the third and fourth corner, coming to the white flag, gets that. What an incredible place to get your second win at. And as it rode on Saturday, unlike NASCAR's Premier Cup Series racing on Sunday, the Xfinity cars featured the Super Speedway package at Indy, which limited the horsepower. While many questioned going in about what the racing might look like, obviously it slowed the cars down, the results certainly exceeded any expectations. Drivers had to work to complete passes, but could use the long straights to their advantage to reel competitors in what seemed to me to be a similar style of racing to the Indy cars in the 500. I really enjoyed the Xfinity race, but I think it's a product of the track. The Cup car has raced much better at the 1.5 miles with faster corners where the drivers just have to lift off the throttle. But here at a track with big road course style corners, the Xfinity car, which has done better in road courses, we've talked about, really plays to its strengths.
Yeah, I thought it was a great weekend of racing. They had the truck race at IRP, which is still one of my favorite small tracks in all the world. One final note on Indy. There is somebody mentioned, and I kind of mentioned this, I fell into this trap of looking at, well, there sure do seem to be a lot of empty seats. Now, here's the thing. Somebody pointed out on social media this week, and I agree with them. There's 350,000 seats at Indy. Let me say that again, 350,000 seats at Indy. Now, you're going to fill those for the Indy 500, and they regularly do, but sellouts at other tracks would still make this look like an empty track. And by the way, the track estimated that there were 70,000 fans on Sunday, which is still over the capacity of several tracks we've already been to. So seeing that cavernous track with empty seats, I don't think that's big a deal. 70,000 fans for a race there is still nothing to see, nothing to sneeze at.
Right. Imagine 70,000 fans at Martinsville. It would be an incredible turnout. And that's just the reality of NASCAR. It's not the same as Indy ultimately. But another thing that even aggravated it is a lot of the fans, a lot of the stands at Indianapolis I saw on Twitter this week are covered, which you don't really get to see on TV. But those are obviously the really desirable ones in the summer heat. So a lot of the fans you can't even see on the TV or sitting under some covered stands while they're really open, the less desirable stands are because it's one of the biggest capacity venues, sports or otherwise, in the world. It's just not going to be able to be filled except by its premier event. But NASCAR, I think, definitely should be racing there. There was a lot of conversation about whether it was right to race in the Oval this year and whether it should count as a crown jewel event. Obviously, we went back to the Oval after 4 years, just like we talked about last week. My view, of course, it's a crown jewel race. It's the most famous oval track and probably the most famous racetrack in the world, and NASCAR just belongs on the oval. It might not be great racing, but I think it's better than the road course last year. And either way, NASCAR belongs to this track, plain and simple, and just ask the drivers.
And I totally agree with you. It's a crown jewel event on the oval, not on the road course. But I'm still going to throw this out there and say that I would like to see the Xfinity race at IRP. But if they don't, I'm still fine because Saturday they proved they can put on a hell of a show. All right.
Just rant and rave like you do to the TV during sports.
All right, this week's rants aren't going to be very big because we're coming into an off week and we're tired. But one thing I do want to kind of rant about is Elton Sawyer on Saturday or on Sunday. He did make some comments to NASCAR.com after the race was over. I think a lot of us in the media were a little miffed by that because normally when something happens, he's made available to all the media. He wasn't on Sunday. He just talked to NASCAR.com. And that kind of threw everybody else for a loop. He should have been made available to the media. So, I'm gonna throw some shade at NASCAR a little bit. I don't know if it was intentional. Now, granted, NASCAR.com may have had, seized the moment and saw him and grabbed it, but I still think Elton should have been made available to all of us in the media, and shame on him if not. All right, this is the part of the program where normally we would talk about the next race, and we're going to talk about Richmond, but it's 2 weeks away. In between now and then, we have got the Paris Olympics, the Summer Olympics in Paris, finally. I love the Olympics ever since I was a kid. I can remember, I think it was the 1976 Olympics, 1974, one of those years, when I was a mere lad growing up in southern Indiana. We had a McDonald's we used to go to. And that year, they had a contest where they would give out these little prize pieces. And if Americans won this game, if they won gymnastics or swimming or whatever it was, you got free food. Well, being the little mischievous brats that we were, we ended up with hundreds of these. And Americans did quite well in those Olympics. So we pretty much lived on a diet of McDonald's for that entire summer. That's my big memory of the Olympics, that and seeing the torch for the Atlanta Olympics come through here in Orlando. We actually went out and saw that. So I love the Olympics. I'm looking forward to it. My faves that I'm looking forward to, hockey, of course, because I am a hockey fan. Surfing, because I'm a terrible surfer. But I'm curious to see how that's going to work. Skateboarding, I love skateboarding, even though I don't skateboard anymore. And BMX. Those are the ones that I'm looking forward to. I'm also a little partial to Simone Biles because I was in a small group interview with her last year. And I'm a huge fan of hers because she was awesome to talk to, and I wish her well. So what are your take on this Olympics, Owen?
Absolutely. Well, I think you're right about surfing. They've got a beautiful venue out in some of the French Pacific Islands, I think. So that'll be absolutely fantastic to see. But there's a lot of hugely impressive talents, from LeBron James and Scotty Scheffler to some lesser known talents like Anna Hall, a breakout heptathlete, which is a lot of events, who's getting some well-deserved commercial spotlights. But there's really a story in every event. I'll be mostly watching swimming just because it's the only thing I can kind of do well. There are some huge stories to watch in just about every event. Caleb Dressel, the incredibly dominant sprinter and butterflyer who has a hugely powerful dive off the blocks, is making a return to the sport after 2 years and after having a child. So we'll see if he can defend his multiple world records. Katie Ledecky is a force in distance swimming, my favorite discipline, who's won by 10 or 20-second margins in the 800 and the mile before. But Australian Ariane Titmus has bested 2 of her records already and looks to take the rest this year. So there should be some nice and long races to watch in the women's distance events. Watch also Frenchman Léon Marchand from Arizona State, who took Phelps's record in the 400 medley, which is an event with every stroke for himself earlier, I think, last year. But the biggest breakout for me to watch came in the trials, the Olympic trials in Indianapolis as well, when Regan Smith, who trains at ASU as a pro under Michael Phelps's old coach, broke the world record in the 100 backstroke. There's a lot of good talents in the American team, but there will be some competition from some really strong international swimmers. So I'll have my eye on swimming, and there's really a story in every event to get into.
And that's Regan Smith, the swimmer, not the diver. And you're also selling yourself short because you are a collegiate swimmer and you're also a coach. So don't say you can't kind of do it. You do a great job as swimming. So I know you're fired up for it. But speaking of not Regan Smith, motorsports, obviously in the Olympics, they don't have it. But I found this, I dug around a little bit and I found some interesting facts. The world in 1900, they demonstrated motorsports along with the other Olympic events at the World's Fair. And then in 1936, there was an unofficial Olympic rally, but they didn't give any medals. They also tried virtual racing in 2021. And so I wouldn't mind seeing, I mean, they're doing breakdancing and all this other junk. I would love to see motorsports as part of the Olympics.
Yeah, I wish we could finally settle the best driver debate once and for all. But I'm sure no one would agree anyway. We'd put them all in formula cars or something that would bias one discipline. And I think that's just the fun of being a motorsports fan. While other sports crown their bests every 4 years, we get to keep the debate going.
Yeah, and there is talk about sanctioning the Olympics to have some form of motorsports in 2028. And NASCAR has proven they could race around the Coliseum. And we had the big, they used to have the Race of Champions that they did in Wembley and some other venues. I remember the year that Carl, when I was working with Carl, did it, and it was an awesome event. I could see something like that, maybe not on a big scale, but something, where we could do that. So we'll see. But LA 2028 going to be closer to home, going to be on the continent for the Olympics that summer.
I'm really excited. And one thing I just want to see is I want to see the LA mayor clean the LA River beforehand. Parisian Mayor Anne Hidalgo jumped into the River Seine to demonstrate firsthand how clean it was, ready for some distance swimming and triathlon events. She got a lot of flack for that on social media, but I'm really impressed with the efforts. The Seine is not a clean river. No city river really is. And I hope it puts on a good show. Disagree with her politics all you want, but I hope the concrete chasm that is the LA River also gets a bit cleaner and maybe a few more trees around it before that. But otherwise, I'm excited for homegrown Olympics as we keep hearing about some new venues. I think Oklahoma's got some venues as well now. So it should be a good, not just LA, but around the entire country, something for everybody to watch.
And obviously the LA Memorial Coliseum is going to be in the mix too. And we're all familiar with that. I've been there, love LA. And that's so funny to hear about the river. There are parts of that river outside of the city that are actually a little more natural than what you see going through the city. But that would be funny. See the LA, whoever the LA mayor is at that time, have them jump in the river. Let's see. So anyway, so that's the Olympics for the next 2 weeks. Then we go to Richmond. We come back on August 12th, which is a Sunday night race. I still don't like Sunday night races, but they're going to do it on Sunday night. We're going to have the tire compounds. Chris Buescher was the defending winner last year. It was his first of his 2 consecutive wins. Denny Hamlin won in the fall. And then Hamlin also won there this spring. So in my mind, I'm wondering if he can sweep the season. The last driver to do that, to sweep the Richmond races in a single season, was Martin Truex Jr. in 2019. And I'll tell you, I'm going to go out on a limb in his retirement year with his experience there. Even though it was in the older car, I think Truex is going to be my pick for Richmond.
I think my pick has to be Denny Hamlin. I just take the obvious one. I know he won earlier this year, but he has struggled some in the middle of this season, looking to get back into victory lane. Obviously, he has those 3 wins and the one unofficial win at the Coliseum. Started the season really strong, looking for a resurgence coming to the playoffs. But a driver I've got my eye on too is Joey Logano. The Fords have gotten a lot stronger throughout the year. Obviously, we talked a lot in the beginning of the season about just how they were underperforming. But Joey Logano got a second at Richmond earlier this year, kind of starting the resurgence before his eventual win. And he has a great average finish at the track of 6.3. He needs some better results since the win. So I think this might be a track that he gets at one of his better tracks, kind of a quietly good track for Joey Logano and the entire Penske group. So I've got my pick for Hamlin, but I've got my eye on Logano.
There you go. All right. You are going to, if I remember right, you're going back to England for a couple of weeks, right?
I'll be in England right at the end of the Olympic break, and then right back at it here.
Okay, so that's our take. We'll be watching the Olympics. I'll be getting fat around, sitting around my pool, while our world traveler will be cheering on the swim team. And then we'll come back. We'll get back to NASCAR. We'll get back to finish the season. I know we're going to be at several of the races in the last 10 races of the season. I know I'm going to be at Darlington. I'm going to be at Charlotte. I'm going to be at Martinsville and Daytona, obviously. So a lot to come. But for the next 2 weeks, don't expect to hear much from NASCAR. Don't expect to hear much away in the news. But keep an eye on cupscene.com to keep everything, to keep up on all the NASCAR news. We will talk to you in a couple weeks. Have fun. Enjoy the Olympics. USA. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening to Speed Talk Live. For questions or just to tell us how bad our production is or to leave other feedback, leave us a comment below. For all the latest NASCAR news, visit www.cupscene.com. Until next time, peace out and let's go racing.
All right, there's the checkered flag. Great job, driver.